And if you want to be a professional writer, then I think it's a great balance to look at anything you write as a possible sample versus I have to sell it.
Are there any other best practices that'll help someone get their start?
I think those first few of knowing who you are as a writer, what you like to write, what your end goal is, and then honing in on that. To me, and then obviously figuring out the business. Figuring out the business is the hardest part because just like there's no formal education on screenwriting unless you're in film school, there's no formal education on the business. Like you can even go to film school and not learn the business, right? That part's gonna be more trial and error. But as far as those other things, those are kind of the best practices. Get out there, try and try again, you know. In the beginning stages, write all kinds of stuff and see what you enjoy. Something that I ask my students is, what do you like to watch? What do you like to write? Because a lot of the times those two things don't add up. And so if you know that going forward, I mean, from the beginning, then now you can make sure that your samples, your materials actually add up to what you want to do. Because if you're out in the world saying, oh yeah, I love watching 1-hour dramas, but you're writing half-hour comedies, right? Then are you saying that you want to work in dramas, but for whatever reason you've been writing comedies? Or do you actually want to write in comedies? And so now you know I should be reading those comedy scripts instead of those 1-hour drama scripts, even though I like watching those 1-hour drama scripts. So really just trying to figure out who you are as a writer, what your end goal is so that you can start working your way there. And then once you're in a little more, you can start concerning yourself with getting representatives and getting all that other kind of stuff. But it really just starts with the craft. And also understanding that everybody out there is just trying. No one has the answer, right? Everybody's journey into this Hollywood machine is different. If you decide to go independent, it's going to be different because you're doing it on your own. So just having the confidence to say, if I've decided that I'm going to sign up for this, then I'm just going to do it. And I'm just going to roll with the punches how they come.
Are there any false beliefs that new writers have that sometimes just drive you crazy?
False beliefs. I think one of the biggest ones is that they think it'll happen overnight. You know, they think, well, I have this idea and it really has to be on TV by next year because what's happening right now, you know, is so important that this story has to be told. And I can tell them, I agree with you. The industry just doesn't work that way, right? It just takes time. So I think that's one of the biggest ones is just not realizing how much time it takes to do things. I'm trying to think, are there any other false beliefs that people have? I think that's the biggest one. Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, let's say I watched Startup or Queen's Gambit or one of these excellent series, and I want to I have this great idea that it's going to be very similar. Mm-hmm. Is that its own mistake because it's already been done and it's already been done so well? Why try to reinvent the wheel?
No? Not necessarily. In my opinion, there are no new ideas. Especially now, Hollywood is big on reboots and remakes, right? So they're big on established IP, period. So if it's already been done, the question is, what are you going to do that makes it unique? What's going to make it different? You make it different, first of all, because your experience in this world is different. So if you decide to tell a story about a kid who doesn't know who his parents are and lives with his aunt and uncle who are emotionally abusive, it doesn't mean that it turns into Harry Potter, right? But it's still got the same premise that this child is looking for identity, right? So it's okay if you've seen it. You just have to figure out what unique thing you're bringing to the table. The other thing is trying to follow the trends of Hollywood. Some people are into trends. Some people want to write what they are already seeing on television because they think that's what's being purchased. I'm here to tell you, if you're watching it, the trend has passed. Right? In Hollywood, the trends pass every few months, right? So whatever that production company, studio, network, or streamer was looking for in January, they're not looking for that same thing by June. So if right now you're seeing vampires on every network and you're working on a vampire pilot right now in your house, doesn't mean don't write it, but it does mean that by the time you're able to pitch it to someone, we're not into vampires anymore. We've moved on. So I tell people, you have to decide if you're going to follow the trends or not. That can be a good thing for you if you're already a professional writer and you're already in the game. Therefore, you hear about the trend before the trend starts, so that, yes, you want to be writing the thing that you know that they're looking for, because all of those studios, etc., have mandates. And so they can say at whatever part of the year, we're looking for vampire stories. Well, you're ahead of the game. Go write a vampire story. But if you are just starting out and you're seeing all of the vampire stories on TV or on the big screen, then that trend has already passed. So then now it comes to, maybe I should just write what I'm interested in, period. And when it becomes something people want to read, great. Or, like I've said before, sometimes it's not about selling something, and it's about having it as a sample to show how great of a writer you are. Because if you can write vampires, I'm going to assume you can write ghosts. I'm going to assume you can write werewolves. I'm going to assume that you can write in this science fiction, fantasy, world, or maybe horror, whatever it is, whatever kind of story it was. So you can still use that as a sample to get you into the next thing. It may not get purchased. And if you want to be a professional writer, then I think it's a great balance to look at anything you write as a possible sample versus I have to sell it. Because you don't have control over what happens on the other side unless you're doing it independently. So if you write something as I have to sell this, then now you're setting yourself up for disappointment if you don't. Versus saying I'm writing a fantastic sample and I'm going to show this to someone, and those people might like it and they might decide they want to buy it. Now, win, right? Now you have a win. But yeah, I would say just focus on writing what you like to write. That's what makes it fun. If it's not going to be fun, we could all be doing something else, right? We can all be, we took on this creative job because it's supposed to be fun. If it's not going to be fun, then we could be doing whatever job someone else tried to push us into.
What if I say, well, I'm going to resurrect an old show like The Office, but we're going to all be on Zoom or Facebook Live or Google Chat, and we're going to it's going to be so cool, and it'll be the same office politics, but now we're all virtual and our bosses are spying on us at home.
Yeah.
So it'll be really cool, and it's been a few years since the show was on, so I can resurrect it, right?
Maybe. Right? If someone out there is interested in it, if someone out there is looking for something like it, like I said before, Hollywood is kind of interested in established IP at this point. And not to say that you would then have to get in touch with the people who made The Office and blah, blah, blah. It'd have to be different enough, because if it's the same thing, then now you're infringing on their copyright.
Okay.
Right? So you're not necessarily making The Office, unless you are, right? There are a lot of reboots that are being made right now, and they're making Bel-Air, which is a reboot of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, right? With an entirely different group of people. But that means that they went through the proper channels to make sure that there's no infringement, et cetera, so they can do that. So instead of saying you're making The Office, make something that is new and original and say that it's like The Office, right? Unless, of course, you have the permission to be making The Office and doing it, doing something different with it. But, again, like I said, there, in my opinion, there aren't any new ideas. I've had people pitch me the same idea in 3 different states from 3 different people, and one of those people wasn't even a writer. And I was just like, wow, this is crazy how we're all living in the same world right now. So we're all getting the same information, and that's making a lot of us create the same ideas, if that makes sense. So if there was something about The Office that you enjoyed, ask yourself, what was it about The Office that I enjoyed? Maybe that's the thing that you take and turn into your own thing, because The Office doesn't own office politics, right? If any of us have ever worked in a corporate space, then we know office politics, right? So the people who made The Office don't own that space. What they did to make it different was the way they filmed it, the mockumentary style, et cetera, et cetera. But other than that, it's all the same stuff that we'd see in any other kind of office, right? So asking yourself, what is it that I liked from that? And then how can I put that into this idea that I have that's about Zoom or about whatever it is, so that I'm turning it on its head, so that there's something unique about it. And now I can utilize The Office as proof that this may work, but I'm not necessarily selling you The Office.
So maybe like Pam, she was the, yeah, okay. So let's say Pam's character type, let's say she was the go-to gal and she knew where all the staples were, and, and everybody kind of needed her all at once. So I'm going to make a series sort of like based on her life, but she's going to be at home, but it's not really taking The Office's IP. It's just a kind of a caricature of Pam. Okay.
Exactly. Someone like Pam.
Right,
If you decide to make it Pam, then now you're infringing, right?
Okay.
But if you do something like Pam, because again, Pam exists because that person exists in all offices. There's always somebody who knows where everything is, that maybe that's the coordinator, maybe it's the CEO's administrative assistant or whoever it is, but somebody in that office, everybody knows, I'm going to go ask her, she's going to be able to get it to me. I'm going to ask him, he's going to be able to get it. So that's not a new idea. Right? So being able to say, well, that's what I thought was interesting. This particular character knowing everything about the office, right? So then you have to then, of course, build your story from there, because that's a character. That's not enough to get you a story or a pilot or a series. But understanding that that's the thing that you're pulling from, then that can work for you.
So Pam's a remote worker, but she has another job on the side that her boss doesn't know about, and she's doing it on company time. Mm-hmm. And it's a little bit more nefarious. And so she's got to make sure that she's on point for the office, but then she's doing, I don't know, she's taking adult surveys, or she's doing something that's like, it's not horrible, but it's like, whoa, Pam, what are you doing?
Right. So the balance of that will then be what the series is about. And then figuring out what the stakes are that she is doing that. Like, has she signed some kind of clause in her everyday job that says that she shouldn't be or can't be doing this thing, so that if they find out that she's doing this thing, then this thing is in jeopardy, right? Okay. So you have to ask yourself, what is the story, right? Someone doing those two things, okay, cool. But what do they have to do with each other? How do they, crash into each other to cause a problem? Like, does she have a problem trying to balance the two, or what does it become? So you still have to then build out the entire story around Pam, or, the Pam-like character, to see what it's going to become.